devotion, I require a sacrifice. Your son, Isaac, will be this sacrifice. Go into his room and end his life as an offering to me to prove you love me above all else. Yes, Lord, she replied, grabbing a butcher's knife from the kitchen. Isaac, watching through a crack in his door, trembled in fear. Scrambling around this room speed down.
It's based on a book that Billy wrote called The Prophecies. But the prophecies, most of them anyway, don't come from him. They're a collection of information from different sources. Throughout the contact notes, in several cases and several times, they gave him some prophetic things that would happen in the near future. For instance, in 75, Billy asked for any predictions for the coming year. And they would give him some predictions, usually just within the next coming year's time for the general area. And most of these predictions were all based just on political events and maybe a large snowfall causing damage, local crime, things like that. If there was any political problems, maybe leading to a death or an assassination, they would usually comment on things like that. And those prophecies generally would always come from Semyasi. Billy also got prophetic information from other levels. For instance, when he was younger, during his time of training with Ascot from the Tao universe, in 1956 he gave him a series of prophetic things also, which we went over somewhat on the contact notes. And that primarily dealt with a span of time dealing with several assassination and murders of political figures, which she felt was necessary actually for events to actually unfold the way that they were supposed to. Billy also received prophetic information from what's called the Patali level. As I talked earlier on one of the tapes, on the creation tapes, about the different levels that man can actually evolve to, the highest level that we evolve to as a spirit form is called the Patali level. Some people think of this as a group consciousness level. Billy was able to receive prophetic information also from this level, which was kind of filtered down to him through the High Council of the Pleiades world. And that information was received by him and passed on also. So we have information from several different sources here. Ascot, Semyasi, Patali, and even Billy himself, who understands some forms of future prediction, have all gone together to put together this little book. Now, some of the prophecies, of course, are from conversations when he had in the ships and so forth, but the prophecies that came from the Patali level were of a different kind. When you receive transmissions from a higher life form like this, they don't come in the form of language. They come in the form of symbols, and it comes through what's called spiritual telepathy. Spiritual telepathy, unlike material or primary telepathy, is very, very long range, and it doesn't come in an audible form. It comes in a series of symbols, which the person who's the student understands them, must then convert the symbols into language and tell the story properly. So one has to be trained and understand the symbol language very well to be able to do that. When Billy was very young, part of his consciousness and memory and abilities and knowledge of the symbol language was unlocked, and over the years of study and so forth, he learned more and more about this, so he was able then to convert the symbols into language. Billy's own predictions are not the result of any type of future vision, but Kabbalistic calculations. The transmissions that he gets from ETs and higher spiritual levels are more accurate and far more sweeping as far as the type of information they can get. Billy then receives these types of transmissions in the spiritual language of symbols, and then he translates them into our language. This is different, he says, than the abilities of seers, he calls, who we normally, some other prophets and seers who give us, in our modern times, give us prophetic statements. He says they see the future usually through their own psychic abilities, and it isn't from the spiritual language that he's talking about. The problem therein is that without use of obtaining information through the symbol language, the prophecies generally will always be a mixture of the own individual's egos, fears, and desires, and they're never very accurate. I think we're seeing that in our own time. There's an awful lot of people, psychics, and people predicting things, one thing and the other. But, they're never really very accurate. Maybe they are accurate on a few things, and then they're way off on others. So there certainly isn't any continuing high probability of accuracy by anybody that I know of. So what Billy's talking about is there can't be an exact science to seeing the future, because such does exist, but it involves the knowledge of a particular language of symbols that most people, or practically no one else on the planet, really has any knowledge of. Interesting thing about the prophecies, the way they're written, and there's some, in many areas they're very vague, and in many areas they kind of like any attempt to explain the prophecies any more in detail than he's gone into here, because he believes only a person who can understand the truth himself, when it is given to him in hidden form, is able to bear or tolerate it. That's how he puts it. Which means that the prophecies themselves have some hidden meanings in different areas, and are a little hard to understand to most of us. But for one who understands prophecy, and one who understands future vision, or may not know some of the symbols, they would be able to unravel these mysteries on their own. And his point is well taken that if we don't have the level of knowledge to understand it, then we probably shouldn't even have the information. He makes an analogy as to our stomachs. That just like our stomach, which is only capable of digesting digestible foods, it can't digest poisons and rocks and other things that you stick in it. That the human understanding can only take in what it can comprehend, that which it can understand, or what is digestible in an understanding form. If you try to take in information that's too high for you or too difficult to understand, it's just going to overpower you and probably cause you frustration, irritation, or whatever. Billy's also able to calculate a person's death and his past life, something that he was taught and understands quite well. But he says these are the sort of things that when he speaks to someone and, they have good reason to want to know about these things, and he's more than happy to provide that. But he's always cautious about letting predictions out too clearly or letting certain people know certain things, because it leads, unfortunately, to, fear or whatever in that individual. Predictions, let me clear up a couple things that predictions, what we call a prediction, that's a future event. These are computed with Kabbalistic calculations, and they lead to very exacting results. Predictions always come to pass, he says, very absolutely accurately. That's because a prediction rests on an established fact, and then proceeds to a certain outcome or effect that has to take place because of the factual knowledge that it started with. So it's kind of like logic. If you take a logical statement and allow it to move forward, it comes to a logical conclusion by virtue of its own clarity of thought and truth. So prediction seems to be something like that. If you start with an established fact, you can calculate then the result, more or less, of that prediction or that fact that's been started in motion. So it's very exacting. Prophecy, though, is slightly different. He says they're different. A prophecy is generally just like a warning function. It can show an end result, but that result might come from certain facts if there's no change happens in a certain time. So it's like a warning about something to happen, but free will could come into play there. But if no free will comes in or nothing gets involved, then the prophecy becomes a prediction, and he says will surely come to pass. So we have some difference here between a prediction and a prophecy. A prediction is something that's almost absolute, that can be calculated based on known facts and will almost have a positive outcome. A prophecy is more of a warning and can actually be interfered with, but if nothing happens to change a prophecy, then it becomes a prediction by virtue of the fact that nothing was done to stop it, and it also will come to pass. Prophecy also is quite variable according to the free will of men, and that's the point he was trying to make in the basic difference between them. That when we hear a prophetic statement, it's a warning about something, and we have the possibility of maybe doing something about it. Therefore, it's not certain that a prophesied event will take place if it's changed by a good evolution. But what he means by that is that this means that a person's evolution, or in other words, your continued growth of knowledge, accumulation of spiritual knowledge, that has to happen without the knowledge of a prophesied event getting in the way or interfering with your natural course of evolution. Say you're just going through your life and you're moving towards something, you're living your life in a certain way, and suddenly a prophecy comes along that you find very disturbing, you think it's going to have some effect on you, and you change your life, based on this prophecy. Maybe you react differently, or you just change the course of events in your life. You have then interfered with your normal evolution, which would run its course and provided certain kinds of learning. So, in this respect, then a prophecy is not good for a person to know, especially if he doesn't accurately understand the ending or what's going to happen. Prophecies usually only demonstrate one possibility, and at the same time they just demonstrate one type of warning. So we have to regard prophecies then as something that one can be changed because of free will, and regard them as kind of a warning then. Prophecy should never be clearly revealed, he says, because the person then will make changes in an evolution. The evolution then is thrown off because the person does something that he normally wouldn't. Also, there's certain events in a prophecy which usually should be kept secret, because here he's insinuating that one of the problems with prophecy is that people overreact. And I see that even today, where people are becoming more and more sensitive about predictions that psychics make and so forth about the great earthquake in California or the entire West Coast sinking into the water. These things can cause great fear and disruption in people's lives. I know several people right now who have really disrupted their entire lives, moving their families, losing their jobs, selling their homes and so forth, out of fear because of predictions that they read in the paper or in newsletters that are being circulated around the country. And this, for people who are slightly unstable and are easily drawn to fear or negative things, this is very disruptive to them. They just can't help themselves. And so it really is not serving, the proper interests that the predictor probably had in mind. You have to be very careful when you predict things and come about your predictions, like saying that they are real, that they're really going to happen, because it can be very disruptive to people's lives, and like I say, causing people an awful lot of fear, and we certainly don't want that. Certain information within prophecies must also be kind of vague, he says, so only people with a certain level of understanding would be capable of decoding them. I guess that would be similar to like Nostradamus, and he has all these quatrains with, dates and time schedules and so forth, and nobody ever seems to get straight. I noticed that there was a book out just about a year or so ago, some people claiming that they had finally unlocked the Nostradamus code, and they felt they nailed it down, and now you could count on this book. Well, I've had that book on the shelf, and so far all the events they said that would happen in '92, none of them have happened. So again, they've goofed. They were not able to properly decode them. Because of that, they wasted a lot of people's time, money. A lot of people bought the book and probably changed things in their life based on that, or filled their head with a bunch of nonsense that didn't really happen. So these people were behaving rather irresponsibly by claiming to have done so much and really have done nothing at all. This leads us to kind of one final statement on this, and then we'll move into some of the prophecies and predictions. But be very careful of those who prophesize. Also, a little caution to you out there who may be wanting to do some predicting or prophesizing. Even though you think you may have learned some ways of calculating it, you may be gaining in some visions and so forth that seem to come true now and then. Be very careful in these difficult times coming up in the near future about making predictions or prophecies of any kind. Because for the most part, if you only know a little bit about prophecy and prediction, you're going to be wrong. And it's this type of information where a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. If you don't really know what you're doing, Billy says in the times coming, which are very dangerous, which world events are going to be very dramatic, if you are certain predictors and so-called seers and prophetic psychic people are going to be saying things that are going to be coming happen, and they're not going to happen. They're going to cause a lot of fear and trouble with people, and a lot of psychics and predictors are going to wind up being killed or murdered, whatever, by people who are just driven insane by being misled in their lives by these psychic predictions. We know we're going to have obviously some difficult times coming up with natural disasters and everything, so here's a little tip during difficult times. Don't be predicting things and causing people to change their lives and becoming responsible for other people's lives unless you're really sure about what you know, what you're doing. If you start predicting things and change people's lives and it doesn't really happen, then there's likely to be some recourse into your life. In the introduction to Billy's book, he's taking a little time to remind people here on Earth of the times that we are living in. And as I mentioned to you before, we're in this so-called New Age period we're moving into, where geographically we're moving into this close proximity to the central sun. This time period it is a time of change when the stepped-up radiations from the central sun then start affecting everything on the planet, including the planet itself. So it's a time time of turmoil because as things speed up, it goes a little too fast for society and for certain people, so we have a lot of problems. The predictions of past from biblical times, which are still coming true, we have to be very careful about their habits. And he cautions us that as a race, as a planet, we're really doing nothing about the major problems on our planet. He says since 1974, the total atomic destruction of the Earth has been averted by some very powerful beings, extraterrestrials. That, of course, was some of the work of Ascot in his younger contacts. That danger is past. That was existing then, but the danger of a third world war has not been removed at all. It's still going to happen pretty much just exactly the way that it's predicted. It has been predicted for a couple of thousand years because the people are doing nothing to change it. Billy says, look to the beginning of the Third World War to come during a time when we think things are very peaceful. Suddenly, without any warning at all, in the middle of the night, the cry of war is going to break out in the middle of the night, and it's going to be a great surprise to everybody here. So we want to look perhaps right now. It's hardly any peace anywhere on the planet. There's wars everywhere you look. Okay, let's move into some of the more definite prophecies. And let me start a little bit with some of the prophecies from the Talmud Emmanuel, which is the original teachings and thoughts of Emmanuel, who was wrongly called Jesus Christ. One of the important things in there that, as we all have heard, is the prediction that he said that he would return. Some people believe he's returning in 2,000 years. Well, that isn't exactly what was in there. He just says it will come to pass in 2,000 years when mankind has become capable of better thought, and that his teachings will be revealed again unfalsified. And that's exactly what happened in 1963 when his original writings were dug up. Actually, the writings were written by Judas Iscariot. They were dug up. They've been translated, and they are now out in a little book called the Talmud Emmanuel. He mentions also in those writings that there will be a new prophet in our time, or what he calls the distant future, them, that will not possess as much power over evil or disease as he does, but the new prophet of our time will have the knowledge, which is the same as his, will have the knowledge and understanding of creation, and will be able to, as he put it, shake the foundations of earth with the revelations of the truth that's brought forth. He goes on also to mention, which is kind of interesting here, that the time when his teachings will be revealed, he says, will be a time when a war is threatened from space, and many new gods will seek dominion over the earth. Again, as we mentioned earlier, that Emmanuel is aware that gods are humans, and they are humans' great wisdom kings on the highest realms of physical evolution, who exert great force and knowledge over other people. So here he's talking about that there will be a time, and apparently it's very much time about right now, where there will be a war threatened from space. He also goes on to talk about the prophet of the current time of our time will lead a very difficult life, will be persecuted greatly. There's also some prophetic statements in the Talmud Emmanuel at the time when Emmanuel is at the Mount of Olives talking to his followers, and they're asking him about these signs that he's talking about, when they're going to happen. And he says, take care and be aware that in the future time, in 2,000 years that he's talking about, that he says, many people will come and try to take credit for him, claiming that they are Emmanuel, and try to deceive people. There will be a lot of rumors of war, but people shouldn't really be too afraid, because this really isn't the end. It's not the end of the world. But it is a time when people are going to rise up against each other. One kingdom will rise up against another one. There's going to be great earthquakes and great water, he says, back and forth. This is all the beginning of the tribulations, he says. Man will be delivered in affliction. There'll be massive amounts of death. There are going to be cults rise up against each other. Large amounts of blood will flow. Many people are going to die in these battles between these groups. Hate is on the rise. But he says anybody who really believes in the truth, people that really find the truth within creation, will be able to survive all of this. It says there's a comment in here also. It says, when the people see the horror of the devastation of Jerusalem, of which has been spoken by prophets, then the end will come. So apparently, through all this destruction of the war and everything that's apparently going to be starting soon, at some point towards the end of it, then we'll see all the destruction and devastation of the places in and around Jerusalem, and that will be close to the end.
Yeah, run right to it and let it hit me. Really?
The Jewish nation during this time of great war, and he's cautioning the people, the Jewish people, to hide, to flee to the mountains, especially to women who are pregnant, to run for their lives, really because of the mass destruction that's going to hit their country.
Oh, again.
There will be a great affliction as never before seen since the beginning of the world. It's going to be some of the worst death and large amounts of death that ever happened on our planet. He also mentions, which is kind of interesting, that metal machines will be built for the air, the sea, and the land. The land is going to rot. He talks about heavy projectiles, metal projectiles that burn the world, and nothing will be spared. It says the foundations of life will be laid in the projectiles so they can kindle the deadly fire with them. Then he talks about if at that time, when we're launching all of these projectiles in the war, if the sons of heaven do not interfere, he says that almost no one will survive. He says this will come at a time when the population will be 10 times 500 million people, where 2 parts of them will be exterminated and killed. So he's talking, it actually mentions there are about 2/3 of the people, the population of the planet will die during this terrible time of war. He cautions us that during this time of war, he says there's going to be many false prophets. There will be, many people claiming to be him, to be an Emmanuel. He says we will hear statements where people will be saying that he's in the desert. Everybody go out and see Emmanuel there. Or he's over here at the ocean, or he's in the chambers. He says, don't believe that. He says there's just going to be a lot of lying, because he says he does return, that physically he will return, but he will make himself known. Because he says his coming will be with the host of the sons of heaven, by whom I have my life again at that time. So he's talking about that again, just as it says in the Talmud of Emmanuel, that his life will once again be procreated and caused to be at this time by benefit of the sons of heaven, the heavenly fathers, and they will help him one more time to make his life known. Another collection of prophecies that's also mentioned in the book were the prophetic things that were explained to him by Ascot, and that came back in 1956. Apparently among Ascot's responsibilities and duties during her mission was to prevent a terrible universe catastrophe. It says in the notes that they were very concerned that the events on Earth may actually cause some destruction of the universe itself. Now, it seems pretty amazing that a little Earthman could actually do anything that would disturb the universe, and especially back in the 60s. And they were very concerned up through the year 1974 that some doomsday device that the certain people were playing with could actually destroy part of the universe. I never took that too seriously until just recently. I found out that currently now, here in 1992, that certain scientists are actually discovering that our giant sun and some of our large gas ball planets may actually, instead of being nuclear reaction type things like we've always thought, are not at all, but in fact seem to be drawing energy from other dimensions. And at the top of these great sources of power, like our sun, on the very top pole and on the bottom pole, there is sort of a hexagon area at the top that seems to be receiving energy, and they have mathematically calculated the probability this may be true, that our sun may indeed be connected to other universes or other dimensions as we think of it through the surface area on the top and the bottom of the sun, which means that our sun itself isn't really a nuclear explosion, that somehow it's being heated up actually by dimensional energy. A comment along that line was even from the Pleiadians that the sun itself is not quite what we think it is, that even though the surface temperature is quite hot, that we will be surprised to find out once our technology advances that it's actually cooler on the inside, that it's not the great explosion in the middle that we think it is. So possibly the sun somehow do receive energy from other dimensions, and that could be perhaps what the ETs were worried about in the 60s, that if we were to set off some of these devices which could upset actually the solar system, some sort of energy or effect could be set off affecting other dimensions, which could unleash untold problems that may in effect actually destroy part of the universe as they were so worried about. Well, apparently Ascot in those years took whatever steps she felt was necessary and did intervene in mankind to prevent those certain events from happening. So, good for her. There was warnings always from Ascot during those times, too, where she talked about future events back in the 56, which actually pertains now, because she was talking about, America, Russia, and China are pushing for, like, world domination. They're kind of fighting it out. Well, Russia, of course, has broke up, and that's changed a little bit, and China hasn't really played their hand yet. Because at this particular time, we have to be very careful of the Jewish Zionists, who are plotting a lot of murderous deeds of violence and terrorism, and actually are working in conjunction with certain Christian religions to take over certain areas of the world. So apparently, in the face of the might of America and Russia and other countries, in China, certain elements of the Jewish people, the Jewish Zionists, and certain Christian groups are plotting actually how they can take over certain parts of the planet themselves. It's mentioned in here that the people of Earth should take care not to help Israel, for every small assistance is refunctioned by them into a deadly weapon against the Baghdadis. So historically, it's talking about that they're suggesting that it's going to be a natural event for the destruction of Israel, and it is for the betterment of mankind. Not that death is good, it's just that we are not aware really of what a terrible part that Israel will actually play in the mass destruction and loss of life on planet Earth. There was a whole series of prophecies given to Billy then in 1956, which are now quite a few years old. And I'll just dash over them for you. I had gone over them a little bit in the contact notes themselves, but since we have a tape here just on prophecies, I'll reiterate some of these events because it's important also to note that these events have all come to pass and with terrible accuracy. I say terrible because we're going to read off a list of deaths here and so forth. And all these events came to pass exactly as Ascot said they would, which only confirms again their very incredible technology and their abilities. She says the unavoidable events of the future, and here she's talking in 1956, she says these events will happen with absolute exactness and accuracy, just as she's about to explain them to Billy. And I'll just run over them because I have gone over them one more time. She first talked about the murder of Joseph Stalin, which will be on March 5th, 1953, and that was done by the party itself. It says here that Stalin was showing too much friendliness towards the Jewish Zionist terrorists, and so for that reason he was poisoned. He mentions in there also his successor Nikita Khrushchev will be forced out of office in 1964, and that was to give the rationalized Zionist possibilities the last form of the expression. So it says during that time period in America, Fitzgerald Kennedy will be elected to office, and he will be murdered in 1963, it says, by the secret order of the American Security Organization, the CIA. The day of his death will be November 22nd, 1962 in Dallas, Texas. There will be a second political assassination following just 5 years after that. Through the order of the same organization, a presidential candidate will be killed. His death will be on June 6th. 1968 in Los Angeles. His name will be Robert Kennedy, a brother of the president. It says the Holy Office, in Rome will also be pulled in the worldwide political and religious intrigue. Just the same as with Stalin, a poison will be used to kill Pope John XIII, who will only serve for a very short time. His successor, Pope Paul VI, will be removed by the same method, by intrigues, it says, of the cardinals in cooperation again with the Jewish Zionist extremists, who for quite some time have already been planning their murderous schemes and are trying to direct the future events, to their own will. Greece is also chosen, it says, for the assassination of head of state. for the future, lets it be known that King Paul I will die on March 6, 1964, using the same poison as some of these others have been killed with. His successor will be named Constantinos. He will be forced out of office by a military coup because of his childish inabilities. So Egypt won't be spared either. In the mid-1970s, a dictatorial statesman named Abd el-Gamal Nasser will be poisoned just as years earlier. As his friend the Emir of Kuwait, who will die in 1965, poisoned at the hands of his own family. Mentions King Faisal in Saudi Arabia in 1975 will be shot by members of his own family. She said this series of political intrigues and deaths were among the most important things coming over the next 20 years, and Billy was very cautious at the time not to reveal them because these events needed to play their hand out and happen exactly the way that they were. She was very careful in not wanting to disturb any of the natural events of the future. So Billy didn't, even though they were all written down and tucked away, so he never really talked about them, and he kept them very quiet. Next section in his prophecy book deals with some prophecies that he actually received and some training he received from Semyasi when he was in the beam ship with her. And I related this story to you. One of the force officers over closely. They had a device inside of the ship which you could hold your hand on and think about any person that you wanted to actually know something about, either the conscious mind or the subconscious mind. And by placing your hand on them, you could actually read what was going on in their subconscious thoughts. And you could look into their future because all of our subconsciouses are connected to our future and have some knowledge of it. Well, Billy was shown how to use the device, which he did, and he chose to look at the life of General Francisco Franco at the time of Spain. And when he did, he was able to look into the conscious mind of this person and see that he was terribly afraid of dying, that there was a lot of fear. And when the equipment was adjusted, Billy was able to look into the subconscious and was surprised to see that there was no fear of death inside the subconscious, and he was reminded by Semyasi that that's only natural because the subconscious mind, which is attached always directly to the spiritual subconscious, knows and is aware that death itself is nothing to really fear. It's just a carrying on into a different state. So that part is in there as well. That explained how quite often the Pleiadians would be able to understand things about us. On another occasion, Billy had been told by Semyasi that Pope Paul VI would be killed by his own cardinal. And Billy asked her later on, he says, something's going on here because there was a prediction that Pope Paul VI would be killed by the cardinals, but he is not. He's still in office, and he wanted to know what happened. And she says, oh, yes, it did happen. 2 years after he was named to the office, he was killed. And he doesn't understand this. And he says, you're speaking in riddles. How can I understand that? Pope Paul VI is still alive, and yet he was poisoned and is dead. I don't understand what you mean. So she went on to explain that the good Pope Paul VI was recognized as being, he went against most of the goals and purposes of the Catholic bishops and cardinals. So they went into a secret conference and decided to get rid of him. So it was decided by a secret ballot that the Pope would be killed by assassins, and that there would be a double put in his place who would follow the designs of the bishops and the cardinals. So Pope Paul VI was poisoned to death and replaced by the cardinals with someone with astonishing similarities. They even went to the trouble of, after the double was put in place, they even went to the trouble of erasing most of Pope Paul VI's personal belongings, pictures, books showing him in school or his earlier life and so forth, so it erased any images of what the man really looked like. Billy on a couple of occasions also received prophecies from what he calls the Patali level. It is the highest consciousness in the universe. It is a level of collective consciousness that's risen to that knowledge where it is beyond the physical realm and has total knowledge of all that they see and total understanding. On Thursday, the 29th of January, 1976, at 1:05 a.m., Billy received these prophecies. Now, these prophecies are particularly kind of stinging to our revolving around the evil one, the anti-logos, the sign of the 666, the Antichrist, if you will. And it is the short story here of kind of about his life and what's going to happen. And I'll go over and kind of tell you basically the details here. But it reads pretty much the same as any of us who have read in the Bible and so forth. There doesn't seem to be much difference really in the prophecy at all. And it's one of great destruction and war and so forth, and it's certainly a bad time to be in Europe. So it says it's the child of the evil one, the child of destruction it's called. There will be a deadly adversary to knowledge, wisdom, and truth. The anti-logos then appears in multiple forms. It is the power of the evil one, the 666, which means there is against the truth of creation, is what the 666 actually stands for. We think of it as the Antichrist because we're told by religions that the Antichrist person will be against Christ. Well, part of that is true because Christ, which is the name given to Emmanuel, who taught the truth about what creation is. But they're saying here that the 666 is really against the truth of creation. So we are a little wrong in our explanation. It's an antichrist. It's not an antichrist. It's an anti-truth situation. And the symbolism of 666 means it'll be through a time period when people will refuse to believe the truth about creation and will refuse to live their lives according to spiritual law and truth of spirit. Okay, and it talks about that this Antichrist, as I will call him, since that's what we're all used to hearing, is the embodiment of the powerful, lawless bloodthirstiness of the anti-logos. He has deceptive powers. He'll be capable of what we think of as miracles, all types of temptations, deceptions, lies, and fraud. It says something about in the 8th sequence is conceived the anti-logos in totality. The thing is the person of untruth, of humiliation, of destruction, and of death. I don't understand what 8th sequence means, but someone understand what 8th sequence means, but someone that is more into the numerology of this probably does. It says before the Antichrist is born, there are 7 embodiments of powerful ones, all part of the anti-logos or evil sort of buildup apparently that's going on. 7 children of the evil one that are bent on death and destruction will kill millions of people. The actual Antichrist, the one that we think of as the Antichrist, will be the child of the evil one, born in the womb of a devoted woman of God, conceived in falsehood and lies by the monk. There'll be a monk somehow which will make this woman pregnant. He will be born in some inconspicuous place in the east around sunrise, around the 7th hour in the morning. He will be left outside to die when they think he will. The monk will, but he isn't. Instead, he's taken and brought to the east and cared for by someone they call a treacherous one, someone who never gets his fill of fraud and deception. The child of this evil one, the Antichrist, actually exists in multiple forms, the now and the before, because they're talking here about the fact that the Antichrist will be the duplicate, look like the twin of Emmanuel but in appearance, but still isn't actually a duplicate. This Antichrist child will be protected and surrounded by the power of the one called the evil one, he understands the great power that the Antichrist will have. Apparently, this Antichrist child will come into his power in about his 11th year. And in approximately 8 years after that, when he's 19, apparently his abilities of mind become very strong, and he will be able to control people through thought. He is the complete killer of all truth, teaching heresy, delusion. He's definitely bent on destruction. It says here that the fruits of his evil begin to happen around his 30th year. But by the 19th year, he's already been able to cause a lot of death. His power comes in killing. He burns the world, that there will be a 27 years of hate and bloodshed and fire because of him. Sounds like a pretty sight, doesn't it? It even goes on to talk about the plant kingdom and so forth. Learns how to thrive on the blood. That there are so many deaths on the ground that the blood just flows like water on the ground. There's so much loss of life. Goes on to talk about here that he comes in kind of a disguised firestorms. Here again we have this mention of firestorms where the air is actually ignited and set on fire somehow and just brings horrible death to large areas of people. It says it is the time of vice seen as a virtue, that there will be cult religions springing up everywhere, one killing the other, people literally just going crazy. And the war will last, it says, for approximately 27 years, and this Antichrist will raise armies which have possession of the deadliest weapons on the planet and will bring the whole world to its knees. Well, where this guy's going to come from? Mentions also that he's capable of stealing the thoughts of men, is how they say it. So apparently he has the ability to really perceive how people think and also control their thoughts. He's somehow very wise and future events too, because he watches very carefully.
Now he says here that he can steal the thoughts of men, and what was the other thing he said?
So apparently he has the ability to really perceive how people think the world to its knees. Where this guy's going to come from. Mentions also he's capable of stealing the thoughts of men.
Stealing the thoughts of men. So you need to look up what Elon Musk, his Neuralink can do. That can let people work a computer with just their mind, like move the mouse around and stuff with just their thoughts. Eventually, they're going to tweak that enough to where they'll be able to perceive what people are thinking. So then, and then if you look up their voice-to-skull technology, they can put thoughts in people's heads. So they're going to be able to take your thought, give you thoughts, make you think that they're your thoughts. So you got to look up voice-to-skull technology, because this Antichrist person, he's going to deceive everybody. And that's like in the Bible where they talk about in Revelations, the Antichrist will bring the desolation, the abomination of desolation, which the abomination, I think, is going to be AI, is going to be like a robot. They're going to probably make him, the robot, the say-all, who he'll be the one who gets to choose who gets to live and die. And when they shoot him and he doesn't get injured, that's because it's a robot. So they're going to make you think that they're bringing people back to life and that they shot him or that he's been assassinated, but then he come back to life, and well, that's all going to be because he's going to be part robot and part person.
Start piling up large amounts of silver and gold and so forth. The first war is stored up in the east and the north, and Earth goes around its sun twice. Okay? There will be 10 moon revolutions where there will be a peace after that war. 10 revolutions of the moon, it says. There will be a deceptive peace, and then just when we're not expecting it again, metal messengers of death fall from heaven. They carry in themselves lightning, fire, and heat. The cities of Europe start falling and burning in ashes, and there's just nothing. All are killed. It says 3 revolutions around the sun that the anti-locust again exerts itself. And he has become grown down, very powerful. But he is murdered in the 3rd revolution, whatever the 3rd revolution actually means. So 27 years would have passed during these 3 major epics of war, it's beginning to look like. And it just talks a little bit about what is left. The 2/3 of the population of the planet will have died out. That men then, the people that are remaining then, will have woken up, will consider all the survivors and to look to each other as brothers. And that this is the time when actually people then will start turning to the Spirit. We'll have come face to face with how the religions have really caused so many problems and how the deadly cults and so forth have really ruined people's thinking, made illogical thinking, turn brother against brother. And it's a great time then for the Spirit to find some worth, and people will start to begin to turn towards the creational laws and start to live in peace and wisdom. There are several other short prophecies given by this Batali level at different times.
Yes.
On Saturday, the 31st of January, 1976, Billy was giving another little prophecy about a meteor that apparently it says that there will be a great meteor come from outer space and hit the planet Earth. Like a comet, it says it falls into the big pond, burns the air like a glowing ball. In the year with the worth of 3 with a hideous bang. So you may want to figure out whatever year that has the worth of 3. It says that it's a gigantic comet that hits so hard it crashes right into the earth. Its speed and velocity are so strong that it brings a deadly destructive seed. Mountains actually crumble. Tremendous loss of life. Says it is a monster of death that now ruins everything. People cry out and so forth from misery because it's causing so much havoc on the planet. Apparently there's giant flooding. The air is just terrible. People are yelling and screaming, but there's nothing that they can really do. So we have that to look forward to, apparently, in the year with a worth of 3. The Patali level at that same time also gave us some more little cheering news. It just talks about how the Mother Nature is going to rise up, and there are going to be tremendous gales, typhoons, and hurricanes, which are going to be far greater than anything we've seen before. Well, we're already starting to see those. In the past year, hurricanes hit Hawaii and the southern part of Florida and so forth and wiped out whole cities. It says that ships, giants of the sea, sink in the sea, and great hosts of soldiers will be wiped out. Iron birds that through the air they fly, crushed they will lie on the earth, crash in the sign of madness. There's been great numbers of the metal birds fall from the sky, cries of help, but it's of no help, so nothing can be done. So apparently we're going to have a lot of airplanes in the air, it looks like. There's going to be a lot of reports of airplanes hitting the ground with great amount of death caused by natural causes and so forth. So that same cheery prophecy goes on for about another page, just kind of letting the people of Earth know that we've created most of this through our thinking. Again, evidence that our subconscious really does affect the planet. Well, I see we're running out of tape, so I'll see you on the other side. Well, welcome back here to side 2 of the prophecies. And again, I reiterate that these are prophecies, that we have some control of these events, although a lot of the things we're talking about now are predictions which come from the higher Patali level, which come to pass, whether we really have any say-so about it or not. Most of these events that the Patali level is passing on to us are events of natural disasters, volcanic, earthquake, and so forth, how the world is really going to change. And there's not much we can really do anything about it. If something were to be done about it, it would have had to have been done long ago. And apparently the subconscious thoughts, which are emitted by the 5 billion people on Earth, could have had something to do with it, and may in the future do something to make things a little calmer, but for the most part it's too late for that. On Wednesday, the 4th of February, 1976, at 6:10 a.m., Billy apparently never sleeps. He's up all night doing this stuff. He received another level of information from the Patali level, which talks mostly about earthquakes and volcanoes. And it talks about the volcanoes swelling up so high that they burst forth, of course, catapulting fire and lava through the air, causing great destruction of life. And it goes on to mention, I'll read just a little bit here, it says, already the first time of destruction is here in the Southland, the old original inhabitants of America. This land will be hit hard in the near future, as will the land on which the black men hope. will not be spared from the evil, for there under the land resides hell. Millie had been shown once, even inside the ship, that there is volcanic action beneath certain parts of Europe which no one's really even aware of, which will erupt and cause major loss of life. It says one will speak sadly of the boot country, and that's of course Italy, and also of the countries with the blessing of earth gold. Also the land of the cherry blossoms will be shaken, and the city on the trench will be totally filled with rubble. This could probably be interpreted as San Francisco, the city on the trench, and that could be the San Andreas Trench here that they're talking about. Also the folk in the country of the sword lion will suffer, and the star in the half moon will not be avoided. The country of the gods will be hit or hard hit. The countries of the dragon and the hope of peace, when the fire of the volcano glistens hellishly, and the earthquake tears apart everything in many lands. So it's a pretty, not very cheery scenario there. It talks about in Latin America, the border countries in Latin America, says in the south from Latin America's borders, there the earthquake will hit very hard, taking a lot of lives. And there's just a little bit more mention, but it doesn't go into detail in this particular one, any more exact location. Just kind of that coding there that we read a little bit earlier, so you might try to figure that out. There is unfortunately kind of a sad commentary on Great Britain. It talks about the island kingdom has been shaken in the northern Atlantic waters. It's the year of evil, the black time there where death awaits the country. It says the crown vacillates as an evil reward, as work and deed of the cult religion. Politics plays a role as well and destroys the good island homeland. The crown falls and breaks. The house of Windsor is asunder. The island kingdom is shaken. Bones are brittle and pale. The kingdom has fallen. Only legends about it remain.
Sounds like that's happening in the UK right now over in Britain. Let's hear that again. He wrote this in 1958, and this tape is made in 1992. Let's see what he says about Great Britain again.
Talks about in Latin America, border countries in Latin America, says in the south from Latin America's borders, there the earthquake will hit very hard, taking a lot of lives. And there's just a little bit more mention, but it doesn't go into detail of this particular one, any more exact location. Just kind of that coding there that we read a little bit earlier, so you might try to figure that out. There is unfortunately kind of a sad commentary on Great Britain.
Right here.
About the island kingdom has been shaken in the northern Atlantic waters. It's the year of evil, the black time there where death awaits the country. It says the crown
doesn't sound
vacillates
good.
as evil reward and work and deed of the cult religion. Politics plays a role as well and destroys the good island homeland. The crown falls and breaks. The house of Windsor is asunder. The island kingdom is shaken. Bones are brittle and pale. The kingdom has fallen. Only legends about it remain.
Sounds very much like what's taking place.
There's something very interesting which I've never understood very well. It happened on Thursday, the 4th of March, 1987, at 1:47 a.m. And I'll go through this prophecy. It's from the poly level again. And it's talking about someone in Switzerland. And it goes through talking about this individual, and you'll see what I mean. And after you hear the prophecy, it's confusing a little bit about who they're actually referring to. It almost sounds like they're talking about Millie, but it doesn't come out and say so. It says, you shepherd boy in very beautiful Switzerland, your blind eyes are filled with sand. In your own megalomania thinking that you know better, you perceive yourself very educated, clever, and wise, when the father of death slowly sneaks up. It says, audaciously, this person of Switzerland will think that he knows all the prophecies very well, which are being explained to him. He will want to be very wise and clever, although only really stupid ignorance screams inside of you, it says. You believe in your great exuberance that the prophecies were of no importance to you, and you even thought that you knew everything, and yet what do you know when, if you had to? Be honest with yourself, it says. Everything is only illusion, an evil product from your megalomania shrine. It is easy for you to say after the fact that you have seen it all coming yourself. Where is your wisdom to do this? Does all your knowledge and thoughts rest? Don't overexert yourself in your exaggerations, for through them you will cause feuds for yourself. Says you always want to be wiser than the others, then why aren't these prophecies your own? Remember, if you know and can do everything better, why has death and need sprung up everywhere? There's no truth in what you think, which shows your erroneous, stupid sense. You cannot interpret one single event in order to explain it to the Swiss people before it happens. Nevertheless, Swiss person, you presume so to say, I knew it all along and more. But what did you know, not the least? Therefore, the deaths for a nation's already grinning at you. It goes on to talk about mountains.
Oh, I didn't want to get that.
There's going to be great fires. It says the metal of the SBB, which is the Swiss train system, is torn in many places. It says you don't pay attention to these signs. You don't see the damage, the need, and the corpse. You presume very much and even say that you knew everything beforehand. But you will see that your speeches are dung and your prophecies only utter roots. For now that the first events have happened as an introduction, you will see many things much worse. There will be a great crash on the SBB soon. It will be termed the bad luck train. There's going to be mountains falling and major loss of life in Switzerland. This is a coming hell is coming to Switzerland. Mountains will break off the ridges, destroy live houses, huge areas. The Bergenspitz Mountain, this was only the beginning. I don't know what the Bergenspitz Mountain's all about. We might want to look and see if something's happened with the mountain called Bergenspitz and see if that's happened yet. So because other mountains will follow this severe crashing action. The lakes, of course, will cause great misery, it says, and demand victims as well. There will be great fire. The earth itself will quake dangerously, and the Swiss will experience then hell day after day of fear. It goes on to talk about water, storms, droughts, and snow will rule. The hearts of the Swiss people will turn even colder. All the cantons, which are what they call counties in Switzerland, and beautiful Switzerland will live on with gruesome, cold hand of death. And then it says in Switzerland will become a coffin many times over. Then you can say again, O Swiss person, that you carried all this knowledge in yourself, that you knew of all the coming events, because you had seen them prophetically. You want to be very clever and so intelligent, thinking that your wisdom fell like snow on your head. But where is your wisdom? Where is your knowledge? For it is always invisible, just to be overlooked. Therefore, don't boast about supposed understanding and ancient supposed understanding. Don't praise yourself too much because you really know nothing at all. This is a really curious prophecy. It's talking about somebody in Switzerland who's thinking they're very prophetic, who knows a lot, and who really knows nothing. It doesn't give us any indication of who it is. First time I read it, I thought there was some strange miswritten thing and it was referring to Billy, but there's no reference, strange miswritten thing and it was referring to Billy, but there's no reference really to Billy either. So apparently there's someone in Switzerland who thinks he's hot stuff and he's got the prophecy thing really nailed, but he doesn't. So it might be interesting to see how that reveals itself. The last little cheery note from Patali here was on Thursday, the 4th of March, 1976 at 3:16 a.m. Again, Billy's up in the middle of the night. And it's talking about, it is more death and destruction here. It's talking about that there's a time that will come over the world, a terrible time in which death and destruction will hasten over the planet. From the far west and from the far east, as it sweeps as the very last deadly warning sign. It will be shaken, the old Mother Earth, violently and angrily, the result of man's madness, the reward of his insanity. So apparently maybe we're setting off underground testing, maybe there'll be some accident in the air with some of our weapons, which is suggesting here that we goof up something, unleashing terrible problems with the planet and terrible earthquakes. So the earthquakes will now rupture the very core of the earth itself, severely demolishing human life, buildings, and herds. At this time, deep in the Peruvian jungle, there will be giant warriors come across village and settlements, killing and taking women. This is the last sign of the coming terrible time, when an old enemy of the Incas, stalk, killing, and pillaging, break forth from their century-old hiding place in the jungle, where they lived in leaf huts in a deep tunnel of the earth. So I've even read about that already starting to happen deep in Peru, where some giant-like red-skinned beings are coming forth and kidnapping women and taking them away from the villages. So apparently that's starting to happen already. In Peru, the first severe quake will roll the Udine, U-D-I-N-E. Maybe that's a town or a part of the country, I don't know. When deep in the Earth's core, fire and explosions angrily growl. The countryside is torn apart. There's major volcanoes and destruction. South America quakes and steams from the blows and the smoke, enveloped in bubbles bellowing in gray smoke of death. America and all of its islands need to be named as well. Then Japan, Arabia, China, India, countries which burn. They will also be visited by droughts and earthquakes. So that's also the prophecy thing that's actually been done. There are other things in there, but not quite nearly as staggering. So I think you can even understand that most of these prophecies aren't really unexpected. A lot of these events are already starting to pass, and most of us know that something's going to happen anyway. So the main thing I think about the prophecies is to learn in order to survive this coming period, which physically might be hard. It might be difficult to find a place to live that might survive. Billy did tell me that the two strongest areas of the planet which survive most of the earthquake and volcanic action are Australia and Peru, by virtue really of the strong foundation of land that they're actually on. So if you feel like moving to Peru, you might have a little better odds of missing out on some of the terrible destruction. But it's talking here, it mentions in there where whole countries are going to sink below the water. So we're going to have major changes. We're going to have to rewrite some of the maps of the planet here, and these events seem to all be happening around the turn of the century or shortly thereafter. There's no dates mentioned in any of this. It's all just events. One other thing that I remember Billy telling me that wasn't, I didn't see in the prophecy book, but he said that we should watch very closely for Mount Vesuvius in Italy. That Vesuvius, when that erupts, that will be a sign that the major part or the beginning of World War III is about to happen, a terrible time of destruction. And that Mount Vesuvius, what causes it finally to erupt, he says that the largest concentration of negative thinking on the planet is actually in Rome. And Mount Vesuvius itself isn't in Rome. It's quite a ways away. I think it's like 100, 150 miles away. I might be wrong. I'm forgetting my geography from when I was over there. But he says actually Mount Vesuvius, as you can see below the ground, that the volcano itself doesn't go straight down, but actually bends over and goes underneath the city of Rome. The negative thinking in Rome, the subconsciousness in Rome, will be a factor in triggering Mount Vesuvius, and that will be the last major event just before World War III. So if we hear about Mount Vesuvius starting to spurt, or does, then watch very carefully. In the middle of the night sometime, World War III is going to break out and somebody's going to attack somebody. So we do live in pretty dangerous times. Here in 92, we're looking at Russia suddenly having tens of thousands, I think something like 27 or 37,000 warheads that have yet to be dismantled. We have all over the East all sorts of third world nations which have, over the years, purchased and built terrible missiles of their own. Look what just happened in the Desert Storm thing, where we found Saddam Hussein was building nuclear devices.
That was a lie, dude.
Technology seems to be a little sad over there. But we're going to pay the price, probably, for selling all these people arms. I remember the rationalization of our own people in Congress years ago when they were talking about selling planes and missiles and so forth to countries in the East. And they just commented that, well, we might as well do this because if we don't do it, some other country will. Well, that's pretty silly thinking. You know, just because somebody else may give a child a match doesn't mean we have to. You know, we're probably contributing to our own death and destruction here by arming all these maniac people who have no responsibility with this type of technology. So I would suppose that from an extraterrestrial's point of view, looking down on Earth, this would indeed seem to appear to be kind of an insane planet. It's interesting that on one of the first contacts that Billy Meyer had with the Pleiadians, they said something that went like this, that we see the planet Earth rushing headlong to its own destruction that can only be averted by change in mass consciousness. And that seems to be about where we are. We are at a point where we are rushing headlong to obviously a lot of destruction. You only have to watch the evening news at night to see that there are major problems, wars, death all over the planet. Not to mention just the natural problems, all the famine, all of the water problems, drought, death and disease everywhere. And of course we're facing the problem here even with AIDS. But the natural disasters are going to cause major loss of life. The World War III throughout Europe and Asia will be devastating. It even talks in there also about China apparently taking advantage or seizing the opportunity to march into India at some point and hit New Delhi, wipe it out, take over India. So if you've had any inclination to go to India to see it, you might want to do that soon. I know myself, I wanted to go to Kashmir and kind of follow the path, the old path of Emmanuel, and look into some of that old history. If you're thinking about seeing India, you might want to do it soon because India apparently will be gone. It will be overrun by the Chinese and run forever, and they will sweep into the east after that. Interestingly enough, that most of these prophecies follow pretty much the same line even as Nostradamus. If you've read some of the books on Nostradamus, of course there are many people who believe to translated the codes of the quatrains of Nostradamus, but in most of the books they seem to maybe not get the dates right, but pretty much all these events are the same, as well as falls in line pretty much with biblical prophecy. So here we've had a prophecy for almost 2,000 years telling us about this time, the things that would happen, and yet we paid no attention. Or at least the masses haven't. I tend to think that in some parts of this planet, probably underground, certain governments, probably our own, have gone to great trouble probably to start or initiate new societies which will survive all of this. It's quite possible that as some UFO speakers talk about, there may already be colonies on the moon or working on building them on Mars to actually survive all of this. And maybe that's what's going to happen, that there will be major destruction on this planet. It might even be unleashed to some extent by some of the governments just to kill off all the illogical, insane third world. And it can be repopulated and reclaimed up then at a later time when there's a much smaller, more sane group of people left. Well, whatever the case may be, here we are in historical times. We're on the very eve of destruction, as someone once said before. It's 92. Events easily will start happening very soon. We can probably certainly look forward to the earthquakes and volcanoes, which are already happening all over the planet, to begin to pick up and get stronger and stronger. So watch out for these red-skinned people in Peru that come forward, which are a signal of the beginning of bad times. And keep your eye on Mount Vesuvius for an eruption, because that will surely begin the beginning of World War III. Interesting also in the predictions, which were back in '76, there was some prophecy about Russia invading into Turkey and taking that over. Russia, as we know now, doesn't exist.
Yeah, it does.
It's been disbanded. Of course, the KGB is still in existence, so something may actually happen there yet. It talks in there about Russia being part of a major world war scenario and actually taking action against some countries. But it looks as though Russia's kind of broken up and is having enough internal problems of its own. So it's quite possible that since that time period when those prophecies were made, that there could have been some intervention on behalf of ETs or free will of man or whatever, and maybe events are changing a little bit. I would tend to think that events are speeding up. It may not be as bad as originally thought. I think consciousness surely is rising around the world. We can look here to the recent elections in America and get some hope there. For years, people have not paid much of any attention to their politics. We've become a lazy country, more and more just wanting our country to do something for us.
Boy, you can tell this this tape is fucked, eh? Because it was made in '92. Because he keeps talking about how Russia is no more. Because this was the collapse. He's talking. This was back in the time when the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed, right? So this is where he's coming from. And then on top of that, he's also talking about other things that had that. Wait here.
elections in America.
Oh yeah, here. He's also talking about how the recent elections, because he's talking about how they just elected Bill Clinton in office. Boy, does he got a surprise coming to him.
That are speeding up. It may not be as bad as originally thought. I think consciousness truly is rising around the world. We can look here to the recent elections in America and get some hope there. For years, people have not paid much or any attention to their politics. We've become a lazy country, more and more just wanting our country to do something for us, living our own little lives and not pitching in and taking any part of what's going on. And now we've seen a major part of the country starting to get more and more active in the politics. Because of Ross Perot, if nothing else, he's rallying people everywhere to start becoming more responsible and paying attention to our problems. And now as I'm making this tape, which is in November of '92, we're looking forward to having the administration of Bill Clinton.
He has no idea, does he? And he also claims that Iraq was making weapons of mass destruction, right? So, boy, man.
Fresher, younger man into office with some new ideas to go confront Congress with. We have a very difficult economy, so perhaps the future of the world is going to start changing a little bit for the better. If we as Americans can start taking our responsibility of leadership a little better, taking a little better part in how we actually affect other countries, instead of leaving it up to the CIA to either kill the leaders or take them over through deadly means, perhaps we can actually start becoming an inspiration to other countries around the world through our leadership, through our wisdom, and role modeling as being citizens of the 21st century.
Yeah, okay.
Well, there's one of the little set of transmissions here from the Trolley level.
He's got big dreams, don't he?
Came in 1981 about 4 in the morning. And there was one other set after that on the 19th of November 1981 in the afternoon, about 5:30 in the afternoon. And this was information all surrounding the Third World War and the events that would happen there. We talked earlier about that the Antichrist would actually come, that the 27 years of war as prophesied was at the moment probably going to go down. Just pretty much the way that always intended, because nothing was being done to change man's consciousness. Although that was prophesied in 76 and it came into prophecy, that can be changed because of free will.
Now, prophecy has been changed. After World War II, a lot of the Russia prophecies and stuff like that had changed. World War III is still going to happen as it was foretold, but it's been prolonged. It's been pushed to to now. It was supposed to happen sooner, like at the turn of the century, turn of the millennium. See, the elites wanted to cause war and all the starvation and famines and diseases. They wanted to do that all by 2020, 2021. That was their agenda, but that had to be pushed over till 2030. So that's their 2030 agenda. Their net zero is not going after what you think, the carbon footprint. No. This is all about depopulation. They're going after farmers and everything. What's going to end up coming with this war or after this war is going to be mass starvation.
So we've actually done quite a bit of groundwork in changing that. And even though there probably will be a war, it may not be near as bad as we think. But at any rate, since the purpose of these tapes is to at least inform you about the billion-dollar material, let me follow through with that and at least go through these prophecies about the Third World War, and you can read them, and then as things aren't nearly as bad as they turn out to be, we can see, how things actually got better when all this is over. It of course talks about
and it doesn't get better, my friend. It doesn't get better. It actually only gets worse.
There are millions of deaths, raging people and screaming and so forth. The Third World Fire, it says, is conjured up by the hands of humans through religion, sex, greed, hate, and power. Well, we've got plenty of that going on the planet. So
The Third World Fire. That's World War III. Just so you know.
War is caused because people don't seek the truth, and there's a little bit of lesson here for us about not leading a very spiritual life and spending most of their life with material gain, greed, and power. So Europe will be the central point for all that's going to happen, and what's going to happen here. Germany, where life still flowers, there will be 100 atomic stunts on blow to destroy everything in a roaring fire. Most of Germany apparently is just wiped out. The world powers will manage it responsibly. The Europeans see the world fire. Atomic fire is going to says that the powerful survive in the bunker shrines. They, the great of the world, play poker for power. And each of them hides, says, while they're laughing, and while they toss their deadly fire on peace-seeking Europe as pay. So Europe is really going to catch it here. It talks about the atomic death in Europe, where chemical and bacteria bombs fall. Radioactive radiation destroys much of the life. Under waves of neutrons, the countries will quake. It says it spreads a slow death tortuously, which lasts for days, months, and years. Apparently, there's so many new diseases caused because of the chemical bombs that people die a very slow, painful death. See, it says Thursday, November 19th, 1981 at 5:45 p.m. It goes on talking more about the war. It says people will be driven unmercifully into horrible death.
Any more bombs?
2,000 years ago. The cause, of course, again, is going to be politics, religion, and other insanities, which include greed and power. All those things we're so very aware of. It says the world war will break out in Europe, and every day of no war is precious. It says the times of peace are very short because the world fire spreads extensively and very quickly, and it's going to start destroying everything unmercifully.
And this is the Israel-Iran war.
The power for competition will be devoured by the powerful of the world who have chosen this area for the battle, so that their own land will remain intact. So let's think about that a second. It says that the war is going to be caused, center states and so forth in Europe by very powerful people of the world who chose this area for the battle. So someone outside of Europe is actually kind of setting the war up and making sure that it happens there. Well, that could be, who else could cause that? Us, Arab nations, China, something like that. So the powerful beat their war axe on Europe's head, and while Europe spoils in the fire, the power-hungry thirst for more power. Therefore, other parts of Mother Earth will be subjected to their power and greed. So it's time to go to war. On Friday, November 20th, 1981, another transmission comes through, which starts to talk even more about it. And it gets into the anti-logos thing, the Antichrist, where he's sweeping over the whole world, Christian and non-Christian countries as well, as those fall to their death. Then, let me kind of move along here to some of the better stuff. Here again, it reiterates that 25 million people will be led to death alone in India. Because the yellow storm wave of China, they call that the yellow storm, pushes into India and starts the battle for New Delhi. And after this victory, all of India will be completely conquered by the power of the Chinese. Talks about Persia and Turkey will also fall into the war when Russia invades into those countries to take it over because of the oil reserves. But this won't even be enough for Turkey. It'll also be invaded by another influence. The Christian cults will move in and try to force the Turks into Christianity. It says that this could only be prevented perhaps by maybe the United Nations may try to help, but it probably will happen anyway. The Balkan states fall into a great uproar and begin their own war, driven into it by the Bolsheviks, who will still be continuing their bloody work after their power was even falsely taken from them. Let's see, it goes on here and talk about Africa, and Arabia will be taken in order to make the conquering of Europe easier. Okay, so that's suggesting that the Chinese would do that. They would sweep through India, and then move into Africa and Arabia. That way it's far easier for them to get into Europe. So it'll be very rough for the Balkan states after the Red Flood has conquered the area. The Red Flood is making reference to Roger, that means Russia. So Italy will be destroyed for the most part, and millions of people will be homeless. The religious leaders will meet a brutal death for the most part. The Pope will flee across the waters of the Atlantic. He's actually going to hide out in South America somewhere, in Brazil, I believe. The Red Flood, the Russians will roll through Hungary, Austria, Switzerland, and Italy from the east of France in order to be conquered, says, by the hammer and sickle carriers. So the Russians are going to be a little busy guys, but of course it doesn't look very likely that that part can happen right now because Russia's really not together. So consciousness maybe has changed, maybe some extraterrestrial influences have happened, and as I've always believed, most of this won't happen or won't be nearly as bad as it's written here. So the American weapon depots in France will fall into the hands of the Russians, and they'll take those over, and this will be the time which Bolshevism will rule there for a longer period of time, and it leads the war against England, Spain, and Scandinavia, so everybody's going to fight. This war will be terrible for the whole entire world, but especially for France and the rest of Europe. Plagues and diseases unknown to at that time will appear raging across Europe, which will be caused by the bacteria and radiation from the weapons of the war. The young people will be especially affected and will experience blindness, madness, or complete destruction of the body. Germany will suffer an attack from the east, from the GDR, through which a civil war will flame up in which Germany will fight against Germany. The Russians, in their order, also France will invade Norway and Sweden, while Finland will be invaded and conquered as well. It says GT board, get board, will be French red, and the two kingdoms will be totally defeated in this war. They'll have to relinquish their northern territories to the Russians from the east. All of the countries bordering the North Sea and England will be destroyed by a terrible flood, which is caused by the flood bomb and by a hurricane. Cities and villages are going to submerge on...
Now, the flood bomb that will wipe out Britain, I think, is Russia's SAR bomb. Their nuclear fucking submarine bomb that it's talking about here that destroys Britain.
Which will be caused by the bacteria and radiation from the weapons of the war. The young people will be especially affected and will experience blindness, madness, or complete destruction of the body. Germany will suffer an attack from the east, from the GDR, through which a civil war will flame up in which Germany will fight against Germany. The Russians, in their order, also France will invade Norway.
Can you see a civil war happening in Germany right now?
It says GT board, get board, will be French red, and the two kingdoms will be totally defeated in this war. They'll have to relinquish their northern territories to the Russians from the east. All of the countries bordering the North Sea and England will be destroyed by a terrible flood, which is caused by the flood bomb and by a hurricane. Cities and villages are going to submerge under the sea and will lose most of Scotland. England's position as the world leader will be totally destroyed forever, as the Russians from the east will cause a revolution to break out in England itself, whose bloodiness will greatly exceed that of the German Civil War. South Wales will be defeated through revolts and a pouring out of blood. Ireland bleeds to death in a murderous war. America will be thrown into another war with Canada because of political complications, and a massive attack of the Red Flood on America has the result that the largest part of the U.S. troops have to fight in their own country and can't run to help out poor Europe. But running to the aid of Europe, it says, would be senseless anyway, because through the use of the newest weapons, America will be, for the most part, destroyed. So they're talking again here about the Chinese people developing weapons that actually ignite the air. There's through nature catastrophe weapons, elemental weapons, whose existence in 1981 only a few people know about. Terrible and horrible hurricanes will be released on the American continent. So they're not talking about bombs, they're talking about elemental weapons which are going to cause hurricanes that we just won't believe. It says it'll crush and destroy everything in their path. These hurricanes are connected with monstrous gigantic waves of fire. Creeping barrages, it says, which will race across the land and eat everything in debris and ashes, because of which everything will be destroyed. One of these giant hurricanes, however, is the biggest of all of them, will ravage and destroy absolutely everything. And what it doesn't destroy will fall mercifully before the roaring inferno of the following wave of fire. So apparently there's going to come major hurricane with huge waves over the American continent, followed by waves of fire. It says the hurricane will race northward across the American continent. It'll suddenly change its course towards the northeast. It'll race across the continent, sweeping and destroying everything. It'll move out into the Atlantic, where it will cause a raging storm with such a high tidal wave that observers will say that it looks like a huge mountain that heads straight towards Europe. Following the hurricane, which is head straight for Europe. In the beginning of recorded history, since the beginning of recorded history, nothing like this has ever been seen. The flood races over England and the states of northern Europe in order to destroy everything, let cities, villages, people, animals, and islands sink. While the hurricane itself follows consistently its northeast course, racing towards Spain and the Mediterranean, which there it destroys everything also. The hurricane then continues and doesn't even peter out till it moves clear over into the east somewhere. It says that 2/3 of humanity will die through this third world war. It will be in the billions. In the coming time, it says America will experience 2 civil wars, which will divide the country politically into 4 to 5 parts. Should the already threatened and very soon expected world war end without destroying the entire world, then it can only be because the power hungry of the world powers will come to a compromise. Otherwise, every living thing on the planet Earth must die. It goes on to talk about also the world fire. Apparently these elemental weapons, which are going to be unleashed, setting the atmosphere on fire. Flood also into southern Germany and starts burning everything, it says, to the end, and the Duna will be destroyed. Now, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. It's spelled D-O-N-A-U. It says that'll be destroyed and leveled to the ground. The rivers literally lose their water, so nobody even needs to use a bridge anymore. The hellfire burns the land so much that the land is actually steaming, that there's so much death and destruction. There's so many bombs hit Germany. So apparently somebody's really upset with Germany. If that happens to be the Chinese, then their new elemental weapons are going to take their toll out of Germany, because Germany's a total goner. It also mentions Switzerland. The churches will become stalls for the horses of the Russians, even in Switzerland, where religious places of the sects and cults will be used to store the weapons of the Russians and will lie in horse manure a foot high. Hunger, distress, disease, sickness, plagues, and destruction will break out over Russia, as well as the powerful of the land will find death. Well, Russia is no more, so it'll be interesting to see if maybe parts of it unite, or maybe just some part of Russia, maybe the old KGB will rise up to defend itself and get involved when the Chinese begin to attack. Most of World War III seems to attribute the fact that the Chinese will take some particular moment to attack into India, wipe it out, and continue the war. So the last and most significant sign for the start of the Third World Fire will be a political murder, which will take place in a country of the East. Just a short time afterwards and overnight, then the enemy will very quickly invade the countries, such that defense will no longer be possible. So it sounds like that the Chinese may actually murder whoever's running India at the time to cause confusion and immediately invade into the country and overrun India. Only very few people will be in a position to flee and get out, and the destruction will rush in like lightning, completely unexpected and surprising. 3 main waves of the Russians will cross over into Europe like a 3-headed dragon. The lower head will go through Czechoslovakia and then head to the northwest, make its quarters in the Nap Valley in Germany. The second head will roll straight west and overrun the country. It will push on into Saxony and then go straight across Germany. The third head of the war dragon of the Russians will come roaring from the northeast to the southeast and destroy everything in its path. The main target of the Russians seems to be just wiping out Germany, as well as when they're wiping out Germany, suddenly from the south, there are, it says, swarms of hornets flying over the heavens. The thousands of metallic shining messengers of death scream towards...
Swarms of hornets and thousands of metallic shining messengers of death. That sounds like drones.
Germany.
That sounds like drones.
So apparently the Germans have upset a few people, and the Russians are after them, and the contained from bacteria and disease. Most of the weather is gray and rainy at this time, and there's so many deaths, it's just amazing. There's plagues and poisons. There's plagues arriving out of the disease from so many bodies, which we have no defense against, and take a terrible toll. It says Italy and France will be shaken by the sans culottes, whatever that is, who will destroy any semblance of order with killing and burning. Interestingly enough, Paris will be gone. It'll be destroyed by its own people. The inhabitants themselves apparently will just burn it down. Perhaps we'll see something like what we saw in Los Angeles with the riots here. So apparently Paris is going to fall into the same problem. It says that the church leaders will be massacred in France because of the cowardice of the Pope, and he hides out. Well, actually, the Pope has already run and taken off for South America, leaving all of his churches to be burned to the ground, and the Catholic religion pretty much is just all gone. Part of Scotland will sink into the sea when a gigantic flood rages over the whole land. High as the mountains, as it pulls everything underneath itself, destroying and bringing death. In order to make different islands sink into the wild waters. So Scotland's not a good place to be. Talks about murder and mayhem all over the east. And it goes on for a long period of time. Then, interestingly enough, it says towards the end of it, that the Pope says the people of Earth will, after the end of the world fire, says there's not hardly anybody left. 2/3 of the people are dead all around the world, and most of Europe is totally gone. And the Pope will then come out of hiding in South America and try to take over again or reestablish Catholicism. So once again, he can have control over all the people that are really left. And it's a very dangerous time. At that point, people are just, the ones that are left are, I guess, apparently just stunned by all the war. And there's going to be a lot of cults and a lot of things, different religions springing up and trying to reform themselves to take control over the planet. The same old stuff that caused the war, once again, is going to try to get a hold of it. Well, I think that's about enough for the prophecies, especially the World War III part. These prophecies were 76 through 81 they were given. Time has gone by, consciousness has changed. Even though there may be some war, I have no doubt that it will not be that bad whatsoever. I don't think the world is really heading for its destruction like it's portrayed here. Although it's quite possible that the Chinese might do something. At the moment, we've got the old Chinese in power, and they're coming into Hong Kong in 97. So we'll have to be careful and see if they do take the opportunity to actually invade into India, as this suggests. I'm also aware that even our own government, the CIA, and our own powerful people are probably just as aware of these prophecies as anybody else. And they have to be. And I think anybody who's been watching for, the last few years has grown up with all sorts of prophetic things, either in the Bible or whatever, made aware to them. So I think even if some of these things begin, like if China does begin to attack or a war breaks out in Europe, something can probably be done to stop it. I don't think there's any way it's going to lead to the destruction that we're talking about here. But I thought if nothing else, I felt obligated to at least tell you what's in the prophecy book and try to laugh it off and lighten it up a little bit and learn to just keep yourself in the light. Learn to develop your spiritual self and get that inner feeling of confidence and reliance, and this will mean really nothing to you. It will just appear as just a story that couldn't happen to you. And by any means, do not let any sort of fear or anger swell up in you, because you won't be affected by this. As long as, no matter what happens out there, as long as you can spiritually keep yourself in a point of light and surround yourself with your own energy of light, then you won't be affected by all the fear, hate, and anger that gets unleashed during these coming times. Okay, well, if you haven't burned yourself off completely from these tapes now, there's a few more to go, and I promise you that all the rest of the tapes are far more uplifting and more positive than this one is. And again, just remember that prophecies are just warnings. It is interesting to note, though, I'm curious, though, to see if some sort of civil war does kind of rise up in America. Our recent elections aren't suggestive of a civil war, but they're certainly suggestive that people are starting to take more of an interest in the country. They're distrustful of a government. They're distrustful of a government that keeps hidden bases, secret things from them. We know the government's been lying to us for years. There seems to be some separation of power within our own government where certain levels of the CIA and NSA seem to be operating cities underground and large groups of people that are outside the law. It's even suggestive here in UFO circles that we could be on the moon or Mars with small groups of our own people who are trying to live above and beyond the planet Earth using technology which is not available to those of us here on the surface world. So that these even may be some of the causes of the war coming up. So it'll be interesting to see how history unfolds. But for myself, I'm going to try to take part in how history unfolds by helping myself and other people to at least live without fear. And perhaps if we can spread the word a little bit more about mass consciousness, we can actually avert all of this. So I think that's our job, that's our role. We need to find ways to find peace with ourselves, then find ways to share it so it multiplies, so we can change mass consciousness. Ever since I've heard about the Billy Meyer contacts and the Pleiadians, that's the part that's always stuck out of my mind, that phrase they said about us needing to avert our destruction by a change in mass consciousness. And I totally agree with that. And I think that's what we really have to all work on, is affecting this mass consciousness that is so illogical. Okay, you can fast forward now, and that's the end of the prophecy tape.
I want to hear the Emmanuel tape where Billy went and met Jesus Christ, or AKA Emmanuel. They took him back in time on their beam ship.
Okay, welcome to a rather unusual tape. We've pretty much finished up with the contact notes now, if you're doing these in order at any rate. This is a rather unusual tape in that it deals specifically with the information surrounding the life of Emmanuel, the man known as Jesus Christ. Repeatedly in many different areas of the contact notes, this subject came up, as well as even years before the contact notes, when Billy was having his early contacts with Ascot from the Tao universe when he was a teenager. He also had some experiences surrounding the life of Jesus Christ. So I thought I would put all the information into one tape so you could hear about it all the way through at one time. This way it'll make a little bit more sense instead of just getting pieces of things here and there. I'd like just for a moment to kind of challenge your imagination here. And I'd like for you to pretend just for a moment that you're living on a different planet. Let's say on your planet, it's very normal, the society that you were born into, that you're very highly evolved. And in your schools,
I didn't want to use that.
How the universe
oh well.
was created, how life is,
I didn't want to use the I can see everything. I wanted to save that for the next floor. Oh well.
Space travel,
It happened.
other worlds. You are telepathic. Your memory is superb. You can recall from your subconscious almost any thought you've had your entire life. You are evolved to the point where your lifespan is 5,000 years. You have perfect health. You live in perfect harmony with all the people on your planet. Sounds like a pretty good place, huh? Well, the reason I ask you to imagine this is I want you to kind of get yourself in a state of mind where you live on a planet where there is exact knowledge, that there is real truth, and that you live with a race of people that have now explored the universe that we live in and have exact knowledges about what's really going on with the universe, with creation, and what life is all about. And this, of course, leads to harmony among people because there's no arguing and so forth among one another because the truths are all really known. You've evolved to that point. Now let's say you go to a school on that planet and you decide to take up planetary engineering. And you go through all these classes and you learn all about other life forms, and you're very excited about the prospect about working with groups of your own people and going out and seeing other societies on other planets and learning how they're going to grow, and watching the races that are not very developed discover fire and learn how to talk and how to build a hut to protect themselves with, and how to find food and how to plant crops, and how to establish governments and communities. You want to go watch other races develop. Well, let's say that you fly off to one of them. It's your first assignment, And you get to a planet that's somewhat developed. You look down, and these people, well, they're quite developed. They have industry. They're able to understand the periodic chart of elements. They have communications. They have, education on their world. They know quite a few things. They're building communities, cities, and transportation and so forth. You look down, wow, they're pretty developed. Let me see what I can do, to possibly study and learn more about this race. Well, you get closer and you find out that it's a planet divided by some 200 different, what they call countries. And each one of these countries has their own ideas about what life is like and how to govern their people and how to run their economic system and their barter system. And you find out that practically none of them agree. Not only do they not agree, but you find out suddenly that they're all fighting and arguing. They will even go to the point of killing one another and lying to one another. Then you get very interested. You think, fascinating. These are brand new concepts. And you find yourself not even understanding the emotions of these people. As you listen into their thoughts and feelings, and as you start to watch their reactions to stimuli in their environment, you're perplexed. You weren't quite ready for this in the classroom. Because these kind of feelings, emotions, hate, anger, jealousy, and prejudice, and all this excitement and so forth, doesn't exist on your world. Your world is very calm. Your world is very imbalanced. Your world exists in sort of a meditative bliss because you've evolved beyond these things. You now approach life with certainty, with truth, and an entirely different attitude than the people of this world are doing. So you have much to learn. And you suddenly notice within the hearts and minds of these people as you start listening that they're not filled with the same comfort, bliss that's on your world. Instead, it's a very difficult, hard life for the people on this planet. They're having a very difficult time getting along. And then it dawns on you, well, everybody on this planet seems to have a different idea about life, and they're all arguing and fighting and killing one another, and most of it's because they really don't have any real knowledge about the universe and what life is really all about. The meaning of life escapes these people, and they don't live in harmony with one another, with their planet. And oh my gosh, they're very close technically to coming out here into the free space. What's going to happen to them when they come out into the free space and suddenly find themselves face to face with all these other races, these higher evolved races, who have all these great technologies and all of this knowledge? Well, it could be a short ending for the people on this planet. We better do something to help them out. Most importantly, let's help them out so they can find peace within themselves, so they can start living as a brotherhood of love and sharing and really discover the wonderful things and the wonderful type of life you can have when you live peacefully in harmony with one another, within creation, and with nature that you live with. Well, you got your task set out for you.
Gaming form doesn't let me fly. Oh, that sucks ass.
What can you do to kind of help? Well, let's see. We have a couple hundred different countries. Each one's got a leader. Each one's got a different idea on how to do things. Maybe you can just call all the leaders. Nah, that's probably not going to work out. They don't listen to one another now. Besides, I'm not allowed to interfere directly with religious or power structures of the planet. We can't let ourselves be known. This because this starts impinging on these people's right to follow their own path of evolution. It's very important, as we know in our world, to allow everyone their own freedom of will, to allow them to learn on their own. They learn nothing if we do it for them.
I need bombs.
Well, maybe we could just let some of them know. Well, how would we pick the ones
I don't need any more keys for money. Bombs. Give me bombs.
Let's examine more closely.
Give me
Time
bombs.
examining different groups of people around the planet and find them, for the most part, just like we do for class back at home, they're born pretty much with a pretty good sense of spirituality. It's when they come into the world, they're bombarded by all these unusual ideas, prejudices, and belief structures and so forth that really throw them off track and prevent them from really living in harmony with one another. Okay, we can't take too large of a group. Well, let's see. Maybe we could just leave some information for them. How would we do that? We could leave it in a book, or maybe we could just take over their communication system and broadcast all this information to them in their sleep or something. That might not work too good. Could establish fear or whatever if they thought suddenly that they were hearing
Where's all the bombs?
They probably wouldn't understand what it was. Well, I've got an idea. Let's try on this planet. Let's select one of these people at a very early age. Let's get them before they've been tainted by all of the deceit.
There, finally. Oh, bomb.
Let's educate them when they're very young.
One lousy bomb. I need 2 more. Shit.
Where we really have actual knowledge about
Give me more bombs.
and creation. Let's pick someone who's pretty evolved. Let's find one of them that's older than the rest that has the
Good.
potential
I
for
still need
learning
more bombs.
and understanding. And let's educate him from the very beginning for several years. And we'll give him lots of knowledges and experiences. And maybe we'll take him with us off the planet. Let him see for himself other things around the universe. We'll take him to other worlds and let him discover for himself the truth about things. Oh, I've got a good idea. We have great techniques. Let's actually move him back in his own history so he can really see for himself the real facts about how his civilization has come about and got to the point that they're at. Then he really will have understanding. He'll know more than anyone else on his planet because he'll have real truth. And he'll know more than anyone else about what's with the planet because he'll have real truth. And he'll know more than anyone else about what's really happened in their world because I can see their history books are a mess. They've been rewritten on different parts of the world just to serve the interests of certain groups, and all for just to control one another. That's what we'll do. We'll pick one. Let's find one. Well, we scan our instruments and find that all around the planet there are a number of people who have strong potential, but we want to get someone right when they're very young. Very young, let's find one when they're first being born. As a matter of fact, let's find a spirit in the fine matter world. We know how to do that. Let's find a spirit in the fine matter world and let's intercede with them just as they're being born. So we're involved with their growth from the very beginning. That's it. So we do that. We scan the fine matter world, which is what many people have thinking is heaven or the other side. It's that place where spirits rest when they're not in physical body. We know all about that on our world. As a matter of fact, it's quite easy for us to dial in the equipment on our ship right here, and let's find one. Here's one. Let's bring him right in. Let's cause him to be born. He's about ready anyway. And we'll follow him right through his young years, and we'll educate him as to everything that he needs to know so that he can help the others. That's a good idea. That way he can inspire them. And perhaps some of them will listen. Maybe it'll wake up a few of them. Because truth has a way of being very forceful. It's very strong. One man with the truth can stand up in a crowd of angry people and speak the truth. And slowly that truth will find its way to the others. People will turn to the truth. It will make sense to them, and they will come for the truth. This is going to work. I'm excited about this program. How about you? Okay. Well, I painted this scenario because I think this is pretty much probably what the ETs have done with Billy Meyer. And this is pretty much what Ascot was doing when Billy was only 16. Billy had been caused to be born by a Pleiadian man named Spath. He procreated his birth so he would be born at a certain time.
Oh, I need to be able to fly again. To be able to fly.
In his young years. He had several contacts with him when he was young.
Give me
so Billy knew
energy.
what was going on and what his life would be like. In other words, Billy's life went just like this. His education from extraterrestrials started right at birth. Okay, at the age of 16, his education process was taken over by Ascot, an
Yes.
extraterrestrial from a very advanced planet, probably very similar to the one that we just imagined. She then took on the education of Billy, because Billy was now 16 years old and capable of understanding more and more, and she took him on several travels off the world, on the world, into different time frames, most importantly, so Billy would have his own truths. It's one thing to tell somebody something, and maybe it makes sense to them. But in order for it to become part of themselves, it has to become their own truth, which means they need to experience it and make it part of themselves. So that's what they did with Billy. Ascot took Billy to many different time frames so he would have his own education, so his truths would become so strong within himself that he would have immense strength to carry on his mission as a prophet and to stand up against all of his enemies who would speak out against him. Okay, as we learned earlier in some of the tapes, Ascot did just that. And that she, on several occasions, took Billy on trips in the past. They went once to to meet the Rabbi Gicelli. They went into old Egypt to learn about that history and about the Spath, which caused so many problems here. And On one particular occasion, she's taking Billy to Jordan, and from here I need to quit calling him Billy because throughout this time period he was still known as Edward. It wouldn't be for several years after that that he would pick up the nickname of Billy. So I'll try to remember to call him Edward as much as possible. If I forget, just substitute Edward every place I say Billy. We are now in the year 1956. Ascot has taken Billy on a ride with her in her ship, and they are in Jordan. Billy's been there once before with her, where they spent several days educating him all about his mission and the most unusual life that lay before him. And he learned a lot of things about himself, as well as he was greatly educated in a lot of other matters about the universe, life, and the future that would serve him well. Interestingly enough, when they were in Jordan and they were walking, they came across a rather unusual individual named Jitchi. Now, Jitchi was a traveler, kind of a guy on the road, and Jitchi was about 59 years old. He was a Russian. And he had left Russia and taken off on his own and was just traveling with his pots and pans and experiencing the world and carrying his Bible with him. He was a Bible-carrying, God-fearing man. Well, they had a couple of conversations with Jitchi and told him that they'd probably see Jitchi again, which, to their surprise, they actually did. They returned 2 days later to Jordan and to continue their contacts because what they're going to do, Ascot has brought Billy at the age of 19 now to Jordan in the current time period of 1956 because they're going to return back to the year 32 in that same location. And for some reason, she brought him to Jordan, and they're talking there and discussing about his future life and his past life and so forth. And Jitchi comes and surprises them at the ship. They weren't expecting to see Jitchi at that point, but there he was. So Jitchi comes along with them, and I should give you a little background. We went over this on another tape, so I'll run through it kind of quickly. Jitchi was a very religious type of person and had a lot of trouble understanding that this lady Ascot could be from another world and was not an angel sent by God. So after they got over that hump, it was decided that it might be a good idea for Jitchi to come along, and he was extended the opportunity to come with them if he would chose to do so. And there were some discussions, of course. Jitchi told them that he was God-fearing and believed in the Bible and all of this. And they had to have a few conversations with Jitchi before they left to explain that, one, Ascot was not an angel. She did not come behalf on any God, and she was not here to change the world or anything. And that Edward was undergoing, you might say, a history lesson, and that the purpose of this mission was to educate him, and that Edward had already put out much effort over his short lifetime so far to educate himself very well in matters of spirit and so forth, so he would be ready for this particular journey that he was getting ready to take. Well, as I mentioned on the other tape, Jitchi goes with them. They do make a few other time jumps through history and kind of get up to speed, so to speak, so they'd be ready for this one. It's no secret that probably nothing has had more impact on our society on this planet the last 2,000 years than Christianity, i.e. the story of Jesus Christ. And no matter where you go on the planet, you can get yourself into a darn good discussion with anyone when you bring up the subject of religion. Because depending on where you were born and how you were raised, people from all different parts of the world all have a little different viewpoint. The majority of the world does not believe in Christianity. Just simple numbers. Most of the people are either Islamic or Buddhist. Not that many of them are Christian. Now, we live here in America where predominantly this is a Christian society. When you're born into this world, that's what you are told is true. There's no reason for us not to believe it. This is what our parents and everyone tells us, but there really is no proof provided, and we are not an open-minded society, at least we haven't been too much in the past, that allows you the freedom to actually learn about all the other religions. One of the problems is our education system. This country was founded on the principle of religious freedom. We do have freedom of speech, and fortunately in this country you can go seek out this knowledge. But you don't have too many options when you're a little kid. You're just taken by the hand and taken to whatever church or synagogue or center that your parents belong to. And for most of us grow up, at least for most of our younger years, we grow up just believing what our parents have told us because we don't get a chance to get educated in anything else. Well, here we have a chance chance Billy's been, his educational life has been more controlled by higher beings, so he's on a little different path of learning. But Jitchi, his life has gone pretty much the way the rest of us have. Myself, I grew up in a religious family. My mother was a director of an Episcopal church and was very active in it. I have a brother who's a minister and another brother who graduated from Oral Roberts. So there are a few Bibles laying around my house. And myself, well, I was an acolyte, and I grew up through the church, and there was a time I probably had the entire community book memorized. So I have a little background in that myself. Jitchi was probably similar to that and was having a very difficult time now understanding what's going on and then how history could have got changed and altered so much. You can imagine what might happen in someone's mind when suddenly they find out most of the things that they know and they've been told are a little different. They're different and they've been changed on purpose. So that one might irritate you to find out that you've been misled, that things have been misrepresented all of your life and you were educated wrong. Well, they take off for the year 32. They get into Ascot ship. Ascot, they're in Jordan now in 1956. The ship just pulls away from Earth. And as Edward described it, they pulled off the planet. You could see the planet very small down below. Ascot does something with the instrumentation, and they immediately kind of race right back into the planet and land pretty much in the same place that they were, except it's no longer the year 1956, it's the year 32. I know the calendars are off, and when we talk of the year 32 here, we're talking about the age of Emmanuel, or Jesus Christ. From now on, we're going to call him Emmanuel, because that was his real name. In the old language, it was spelled J-M-M-A-N-U-E-L. Not so with an I or an E, but with a J. So we'll refer to him from now on as Emmanuel. Okay? They are now in what we're going to call the year 32, and it's just a few days before the crucifixion. They arrive there, and they get outside of the ship, and the first thing that Edward notices, he's looking around to see how much different everything looked, because they landed right back in the same spot. They're just a couple thousand years earlier. Well, he notices that the vegetation's quite a bit different. Trees are different. Some of the hills, the slopes and angles on them are a little bit different. But for the most part, he's able to recognize the landscape, and he can tell right away that he's at the same spot that they just left. Jitchi right away jumps out of the ship and grabs his pots and pans and his bag and everything with him and his Bible, because he's having a very difficult time understanding all this. It's quite a shock to your system to be 59 years old and to have all of your well-placed logic suddenly being shattered. Well, Ascot explains that they're going to have to change their clothes because they're going to be here for 4 days, and they're going to do some traveling on foot, and they're going to go to different places, and they're going to mingle among the locals, and it's going to be necessary for them to wear these language translators around their belt. And she has some robes for them, which look like the typical robes of the time. Clothes were quite simple then. People didn't have haircuts too much, and they just, in most cases, just wore some sort of robe. And they had that as well. She had, and it isn't explained why, but she also asked them to take off their earthly clothes and put on the clothes that she brought for them from her planet. And these were silvery kind of looking suits of some sort of soft material. They had to put these on, and then they put the robes over top of that. And Edward was quite concerned. He was almost chuckling. Gee, I hope nobody pulls his robe off of me and sees me glowing like this silver thing here. So it isn't explained why they need to wear that, but it might have something to do as far as protection, but they don't really go into that. They have language translators so they can understand the language of the day, which I believe was Aramaic. That's what the old, I don't know if Aramaic was something they wrote or spoke. I'm not sure about that. So they proceed, and they leave the ship. Ascot explains that they're going to be on the road now for 4 days, and they take off on the road. Well, Jitchi still is mumbling as they go down the road. He's got his Bible with him, and he's getting very nervous because he already knows what's lying ahead. That actually they're going to speak to Emmanuel, that he, after all these years of his life, he never considered the possibility that he might actually come face to face with and actually speak to and talk to Emmanuel. He is so glorified in our time. We've so exaggerated and blown out of proportion who he really was that now we liken him to a god. Some religions like to call him the creator of the universe, the creator of all men, and there's just no limit to some of the exaggerations when in fact he was a human being like the rest of us. So So Gypsy's having a very difficult time, and already the arguments as they go down the road are kind of breaking out, and Edward's trying to calm him down, and so is Askin. And Gypsy remarks a silly statement like, he can't wait to see this guy Emmanuel. He's going to wring his neck because he's kind of upset that he's finding out historically that things aren't really the way that we've been told. And Edward is defending Emmanuel and says, well, I don't think that's really quite the right attitude to take here, Gypsy, because it's not his fault. Emmanuel's living at a time where there's also a lot of ignorance, and I believe him to be a very intelligent, worthwhile human being, and probably very loving. And it's not his fault for all the things that have happened down the years and all the exaggerations. So you need to lighten up here a little bit. And Gypsy calms down just a little bit. Well, they wind up right outside of Jerusalem, and really says it looks quite a bit different than it did in 1956. There's a wall, he says, around it. He doesn't say if it's all the way around or just part of it. And they're at the Mount of Olives. And off in a distance, he can see some little huts that are called Bethpage. And there's some men walking down their way. And Askin remarks that, yes, this would surely be Emmanuel and his followers that are coming. And poor Gypsy is just starting to get all heated up again. He's getting very nervous, and all this is entirely too much for him. And he's starting to get very excited. And Edward turns to Askin, and he says, let me see if I can recognize which person it might be. And Gypsy's jumping in front of them and starting to curse and yell how they can do this to him, and he's so excited. And Edward starts to try to calm him down, says, quit cursing and get a hold of yourself. Try to realize what a great moment this is, that in any minute now you're about to have probably the greatest moment of your life, and look what you're doing to yourself. You know, calm down and relax, but Gypsy can't do it. Askin remarks that, Edward remarks as he looks in the crowd, he picks out the one that's probably Emmanuel. He says, that surely must be Emmanuel. And Askin agrees with him, yes, that's him. And Emmanuel pulls away from the crowd of people that he's walking with and motions to him for him to sit down beside the road, which they do, and he starts walking towards the three of them. Well, all this is proving entirely too much for Gypsy, and he's screaming and cursing, and Edward just turns around and pops him right on the nose. Well, it's probably kind of an hysterical sight. Here's this great historic moment. Can you imagine actually being able to go back in time and talk to Emmanuel, and you've got this guy with you? But I can feel sorry for poor Gypsy. It must have been a very difficult thing for him. The outcome of it is nice. Gypsy calms down and apologizes just as Emmanuel walks up and says, be greeted in peace. And he calls Edward by name and acknowledges Askin. And he motions for Gypsy just to go to the side of the road and sit down with his friends and followers there, that they'd be happy to take care of him. And he turns to Edward and says, you hit him very hard. And Edward starts to comment, and he says, it's no reproach at all. He had it coming. I could tell that he was out of control as I was walking towards. And he says, but it's you I wish to speak to. And so they immediately pull over to sit down beside the road there. We've got Askin, Edward, and Emmanuel. We're having a little chat. So Edward was curious how he knew his name, and Emmanuel says, well, it's really quite simple. He says, I did not learn this from Askin, and I had not talked to her before. Actually, I have the ability, I guess you would call it a future vision. I had the ability of prophecy. I had the ability to look into the future, and you, Edward, I know much about. Your visitation was expected. And you can tell already that Edward has a lot of knowledge and so forth, and compliments him on his education so far. And Edward says, yeah, well, thank you very much. And they start throwing a few flowers at each other, and there's a few comments there about, how advanced each of them actually are. And Edward comments that Emmanuel is standing before every examination coming up also, which he is. He's only a couple of days away from what we call the crucifixion. And Emmanuel speaks, yes, life demands very many difficult things. We all have to walk our way and in honor. And he says to Edward right away, he says, I can already perceive your questions, and I know the things that you want to ask, so it will be not necessary for you to speak them. And since we do not have much time, let me go straight to the answers to your questions that you're thinking. To begin with, the lessons that I speak and so forth are not new. They're not even new to describe my time. These things that I speak of, the laws of creation, the real truths of the universe, have been known to others down through our times, they have been passed on. Here they are only falsified for the scribes themselves. They would wrongly place God above creation and pretend that it is their own God who is the creator of all things. This is simply not true. For myself, I've been educated and know that God being a human being just like all others, but that the God, the great God, is truly a king of wisdom. Creation is not a human form, but a creational spiritual energy which creates all things in the universe, including the different gods. He says it's very difficult to speak the truth here in these times because it's very difficult for people to face the truth. As before me, there's been very little truth spoken on my world. Most people just don't want to hear it. There are so many different viewpoints on this planet right now. It's very difficult for Emmanuel. He says in the future the world is heading for very much misery because of all the lies of the scribes, and I'm very well of all of the problems in the next 2,000 years that will be caused by the religions. They will stop at nothing. Murder, deceit, fear, intimidation, whatever they need to do to control the masses of the people. Emmanuel goes on to say, I know the truth, and I'm well aware that the truth brings with it great wisdom and force of spirit. As well, I will be able to fulfill his mission. He says the truth is far more important than any pain that might be temporarily passing through the body. It's possible to torture someone, even destroy them, but the truth will live on. It is impossible to actually kill the truth. He says, I also know that even though I'm a human being, it will be said that I am equal to the creation, that after my time is gone, that those will write about me and make all sorts of claims and exaggerations about me. As a human being, though, I will also suffer the fate of the bodily death, and it says in 83 years in Billy's notes. Now, 83, if you add that on, he's supposed to be about 32, then that would be up to about 115. So, and it does mention in the notes in certain places that it's believed he did live to be about 110 to 115 years old. It says, my body will be very old, but my spirit will be unbroken. The coming events that are about to happen will make me a martyr. There will be a lot of bodily pains, but they will scatter like the winds by the force of my spirit. This is the way it must be so I can fulfill my mission and continue on to India. Edward also notices as he's speaking and he comments, he says, excuse me for interrupting, but I notice that you seem not just a little weary, but you seem to have a little grief, and I pull these feelings from you. And Emmanuel's a little surprised. He says, yes, I do. I grieve for this world with all of its problems, and I grieve for these people who have so little understanding and live such difficult lives and so forth. And he goes on a little bit about how the world affects him and how he is so sensitive to the sorrows of man. And then he remembers that Edward's 2,000 years of advance of these other people that he's used to talking to. He's not used to discussing these type of things with someone, of this type of evolution. So he apologizes to Edward and says, yes, it's refreshing to speak to someone a little bit more evolved. He said, Emmanuel's also aware, and he seems to be able to almost read Edward's thoughts quite simply. He says, I'm aware of the things that you know and the teachings that have already been passed on to you. You also have very great knowledges. He says, the first words of the New Testament will be written down around 200 years past his death, or his son's death on the cross. Now here it gives us a clue to when Christianity was actually formed. Later on in the Talmud Emmanuel on the other side, we'll find out that it was really the year 189 when Christianity was actually formed. Edward wants to know if any of his teachings are being written down. He says, I'm well aware that you travel and you speak and you teach what you can, but are these things being written down anywhere so that they might be preserved for the future? Because the New Testament as it exists today, there are many errors in it, there are many exaggerations. Emmanuel comments that, well, my scribe and faithful friend Judas Iscariot writes down most of my important lessons, but try to remember that very few people read and write at this time. Judas can read and write. I myself can read and write, as it was necessary for me to learn during my own years of education when I was young. But he says, I really don't have too much time for it, and frankly, most people can't read it. Besides, I'm well aware of the problems that are coming up. Even in your time, people are not mature enough, and it's going to take more than 2 decades before the grain of truth will actually find some soil, he says. The scripture's been stolen from the bag of Judas Iscariot, he tells Edward, by the son of a Pharisee named Judah Ihariot, which is similar sounding. He's plotting to sell these writings of Judas Iscariot to the Pharisees for 70 silver so that they can accuse him of blasphemy. They want to be able to say that even the followers of Emmanuel betray him and turn against him. How possibly could these lessons?
Yeah, my phone died.
Range up. Hierophant. Justice. Experimental pill. Temperance.
What's that? Give me a heart. My strength is just unmatched. They can't compare. I'm just too strong. I one-shot them all. Just one shot. Well, 2 shots on these bounds, but... What the fuck hit me there? Now wonder who wrote the book of love? You bastard. Oh, I'll take you. After we're still large. Like I probably could have beat the boss already, like. I'd like to go around and make sure I get all the rooms. You know what this kind of reminds me of is like Spy versus Spy. They should have made it to where you could go against 2 people, like another person, so you could have done like Spy versus Spy, but on the Binding of Isaac. You remember that for like the Nintendo? Spy versus Spy? It was a great game. Classic. That is like that's on par with like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, Maniac Mansion, like the old games. But Spy vs. Spy was a good game, and it's another game too that like was that Noid one, Noid World or Noid vs. Noid. That game's pretty good too. They're old games though. Where you're from? I'm not monetized or anything, my dude. Bastard, get off of me. Something kept hitting me. I don't know what it was, and I didn't like it. Was there a coin somewhere here? Where's the coin? Show him the coin. I'm not seeing a coin. Oh, wait, what's that? To the stars. These boards are big. Oh look, there's a heart right there, a black one. I'll have to go get that. Oh, I didn't see that because of the map. Yo, after this game, I'm going to be playing some Red Dead Redemption 2. You like? Have you ever do you like Red Dead Redemption 2? Have you seen the gameplay? Oh, I did it again. I run right into the same freaking thing again. I gotta remember to take that down when I'm moving, cause shit. I go and get a heart and I lose the freaking heart. Really? Come on. What a shot. You know what? There could be blue hearts in this, though. Maybe here. It's quite the board, isn't it? It's quite the floor. Oh, I did it again. Run into the spikes because I got the map up and I'm not paying attention when I'm moving. Beat him. I need a donation box.
Shot speed up. The Hanged Man. Experimental. Shot speed up.
101. 101. Go get him. My range must be large if I can shoot from here. And it's hitting the things all the way down here. Like that means it's going the length of the room. Like the range is max.
Speed up.
The blue heart. Where is the blue heart? Oh, no, it changed to the blue heart. Oh, I see. That's everything? Yeah? Now I can go do... Oh wait. I didn't see that. Or that. $111. I've been everywhere. I've gone to the boss. Well, I already beat the boss too. Excuse me. The horde.
of spades. Yera.
Another one.